Okay. Welcome to this very special presentation. If I could ask those in the back to please stop talking and take seats, or at least stop talking. Okay, we're starting. So the host and animator for this next session is Senator Joan Fraser, who was appointed to the Senate on September 17th, 1998 by the Right Honourable Jean Chrétien. Senator Fraser is the deputy leader of the opposition in the Senate. She was chair and vice president of the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee of the Senate between November 2007 and June 2013. She's been a member of many, many Senate standing committees. She began her career in print journalism, joining the Montreal newspaper The Gazette in 1965. In 1993, she was appointed editor-in-chief of The Gazette, a post she held until 1996. From 1997 to 1998, she was Director General of the Centre for Research and Information on Canada, a division of the Council for Canadian Unity. Senator Fraser holds a Bachelor of Arts in Modern Languages from McGill University, a guaranteed path to success for anyone. So I'll turn it over to you.
Merci, Professor Straub. Oui, c'est un peu revenir au berceau, là, de revenir à McGill, mais c'est aussi tout un privilège de vous présenter la prochaine conférencière, Dr. Myrna Lashley. Dr. Lashley holds a PhD in counseling psychology from McGill. She was formerly associate dean at John Abbott College. She's an assistant professor in psychiatry at McGill and a researcher at the Lady Davis Institute of the Jewish General Hospital. She's internationally recognized as a clinical teaching and research authority in cultural psychology and a consultant to institutions, including the juvenile justice system. She conducts workshops locally, nationally, and internationally. She has been a consultant to the Brazilian healthcare system. She was a director of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation and has served on the Comité consultatif sur les relations interculturelles et interraciales de la communauté urbaine de Montréal. She's chair of the Canadian Cross-Cultural Roundtable on Security and vice chair of the board of the École nationale de police du Québec. She conducts research on police matters and sits on the Comité expert en matière de profilage racial and the Comité expert sur la santé mentale du service de police de la ville J'ai besoin de nouvelles lunettes, moi. Service de police de la ville de Montréal. She's written 2 training manuals on intercultural issues in the workplace and a chapter in the book Encountering the Other. She's received several awards, including the Queen Elizabeth 2012 Diamond Jubilee Award, in 2006 the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Award for Holocaust Studies, in 2004 the Martin Luther King Legacy Award, in 1995 the Merit Award for the Ganawaki Native Survival School, and her current research focuses on the intersections of culture, terrorism, and national security. She's also Barbados' honorary consul to Montreal. Et tout ça, c'est bien impressionnant, mais je peux vous dire une ou deux autres choses au sujet de Myrna Lashley, parce que voyez-vous, je la connais depuis plusieurs années, et pas au niveau professionnel. Je la connais parce que nos 2 filles, Renata et Elisabeth, sont des amies. Donc, par leur intermédiaire, j'ai appris à connaître Myrna. I have learned quite a number of things about her. One is that she is absolutely the most doting mother. The second is that she has a very fine eye for human frailty. She can spot hypocrisy and pomposity at 100 paces. But fortunately, she also has a truly warm and generous heart. I think she's the ideal person to speak to us about justice, equality, and the city, and so I give you Dr. Myrna Lashley.
Thank you very much, Senator Fraser. Thank you very much, my friend Joan. And what Joan didn't tell you is that the reason that I have the Queen Elizabeth Medal is because Joan recommended me for it. So thank you very much. Before I start to speak, I'd like to take a few seconds to say thank you to the organizers of this wonderful, wonderful conference. You've done a spectacular job, and you really should be very, very proud. So if you would join me in just saying thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's often difficult to be the last person to speak, especially on a Friday night. One wonders, is there anybody going to be around to listen to me, or are they all going to put their coats on and walk out? Thank you very much for staying. But I'm very happy to be the last person, because I'm hoping that what I speak about will pull everything together that we have heard over the last 2 days. Over the last 2 days, we've talked very much about the macrocosm of the city. What systems should be put in place? What digital things should arise? How do we involve citizens in cities? All very important things. How do we get them involved in the electoral process? What we have not spoken about in a very extended way is about the individual. Those people who live in the city and how they feel about living in the city, and whether they feel that they occupy the same space within a city. And those are the things with which I'd like to talk to you. How does this thing work? I'm pushing the green arrow, but it doesn't like me. Thank you. Now, I might ask you to do that. Now, I see that there's a lot of students in the room, and I'm very happy about that. I hate lecturing. I really detest it. But I am a very good teacher, as much as I hate lecturing. The reason I hate lecturing is because I remember when I was a student, and I remember how boring it was to have somebody sitting there droning on, saying, and now we're going to talk about philosophy 101. And I don't know, but I read about that. And and I'd be sitting there thinking, is this thing ever going to end? So I know what you're going through, and I'm going to try very hard not to bore you, because I can't stand being bored. Let's start from the premise. The premise under which I'm speaking to you today is that a city that promotes inclusion is in fact a city which promotes equality, justice, and security. And we've heard a lot about inclusion, but what do we really mean about inclusion? And who is included? How do we determine it? I was struck by some of the things I've heard in the last 2 days when people would talk about immigrants, and invariably, and without trying to upset anyone, I apologize a priori should I do that, but I really do feel I have to say this. Almost each time someone talked about an immigrant, someone said the new people. Or when they talk about the ethnic, the visible minorities, or the ethnic composition, people responded with something about, well, they're not like us, or they have to adapt to us, or we have to do all these things. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to tell you that everybody who doesn't look like you, who does not have the same pigmentation, is not an immigrant. And the fact that someone is a member of a particular society does not make them an immigrant. They just happen to be differently pigmented. And some of you in here are lightly pigmented, some of us are darkly pigmented, but for all you know, I've been here longer than you. Now, if I look at the black population, now you should know that they've been here, well, the first one that came here actually came here with Jacques Cartier, and his name was Matthew da Costa. He's got descendants most definitely not immigrants, except in the sense that we're all immigrants in Canada. The immigration to Canada of most blacks actually came in the 1700s. And they came here as a result of being the loyalists from the war between the United States and England, and some of them actually moved here. Now, some of you may have newly discovered this by reading the Book of Negroes or by watching the television series. But they've been here for a long, long time. Of course, we know that the First Nations have been here forever. The Chinese have been here for a long time, the Japanese. So we've got to stop thinking like that, because that actually promotes exclusion. It actually promotes, who am I and where do I fit into this whole thing? So that's the first thing about exclusion. The other thing is that when people feel that they're excluded, we're not giving them any reason to get involved. I mean, why bother? If every time you see somebody and they don't look like you, you assume that they're not of you and therefore not of the city, why should we get involved? And then the third thing about that is that if you assume they're not of the city, you're always in a situation where you're having to interpret what they're doing and be in charge of them and look after them. You know, maybe they can look after you. But why should anybody be looking after anybody? Why can't we all do this together? Because this is my city. Several years ago, the city of Montreal made a video, and it's really quite funny in a kind of a way. And I'm one of the featured people in the video. So they had all these people come in and they did makeup on us. I said to the makeup company, I said, do you know anything about doing black makeup? And she says, oh, yeah, I know all. I said, are you sure? And she said yes, and she pulled out all these colors of red lipstick and this. I looked at it and I thought, God preserve me, I know this is a bad idea, but I love this city, so I'm going to do it. So I went through this whole thing, and this is my city, and I did the thing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when we looked at the video, my daughter and I turned and looked at each other. My daughter and I are extremely close. And we looked at each other, and we were both trying not to laugh. And my daughter knew that I was upset, and she was trying to be supportive, but she couldn't do it for very long, because she just broke into laughter because the makeup they used on me turned me gray. And so there I was with all this white thing, and I looked like a silverback gorilla. You know, there I was with this thing, and this was supposed, and I thought, this means that I'm included? And I'm speaking on behalf of the city saying, yay, Montreal is great, come on down. And I look as though somebody had put makeup on me to put me in my coffin. It was okay. You know that horrible makeup that they put on you when you die? And you go and you look at them and you go, no, that's not Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred was black when he was living. You know? I don't know who that is, but that's not Uncle Fred. And so that's what I look like in this video. And they keep using the video because they say, oh, this is a great video. No, it's not. So, one of the things that we know is that the media is very important in shaping citizens' opinions. How do they do that? Well, people, they need to feel that they're being treated fairly and equally. We know that. But how does the media get that message out? Do they just create, and I'm not attacking the media, they've got their job to do, we've got ours to do. They do what they do, we do what we do. But nonetheless, very often the way in which something is slanted sets the agenda. The media's got to do, they've got to sell papers, they've got to get people to watch the programs. I understand that. But again, if this is our city, can we work together on this? Can you ask the people in the community? Is what I'm putting out there, is it factual? Or am I just creating something? Am I just being sensationalistic? Because we all know that justice must be done, but it must be seen to be done. And it's not an empty phrase. It really is the fact. So if you are going to send a message that we don't belong here, whoever we are, you continue the divide of us versus them. So what place does one take within the city? Yesterday we heard about the city at night. Well, the city at night can be very frightening for some people if you don't feel that you're part of it. You walk down the street and you think, well, who is this person coming next to me? I'll tell you something. I go into stores and people follow me around. And sometimes I think it's kind of funny, depending if they get me on the right day, because then I lead them all through the store. My late husband, may God rest his soul, was a gentleman from New Zealand. And one day we were walking down St. Catherine Street, and it was one of these stores that's always going out of business. You know, the ones that, you know, they always have these signs up, they're always going out of business. And so I said to Michael, I want to go into this store that's going out of business before the next time it goes out of business, because the prices might go up for that time when it goes out of business. And I actually wanted a brass vase. So we went into the store, and he went off to one side, and I went off to the other side. And this lady started following me around. Of course, she didn't know that was my husband. And whenever I would touch something, she would come and take it out of my hand and put it down, and she'd say, oh no, dear, that's very expensive. We don't want that broken. I'll tell you why I have a Platinum's American Express card. I do it for the same reason. Whereas my husband would walk around, and he would touch things and be, oh yes, your wife would like that. Oh, she would really like that. So at one point, he looked at me, and I looked at him, and he could see that I'd had enough of it. And he yelled out, hey, love, do you want this piece of junk? The lady said you'd like it. Well, I won't tell you what happened to her. But the thing is, I don't see these kinds of stories in the media. But social and traditional media, they play a major role in how people perceive themselves in the city and how people feel that their communities are being viewed. So if you have a media that's sending the message of these people live in, come on, discern, Todi. Yeah, some people, you see, I've been living here for a while. See, I really do belong here. That some people live in a slum, and that's the way you try to portray their neighborhood. What is there for them to be proud about? What message are we sending about your place, if that's how you're going to do it? And the way that it's shown that your community is treated very often has an effect on how you view yourself within that place. You might become very angry. You might become very untrusting. One of the funniest things, talking about the night, is you walk down the street and some little old lady, or not so little old lady, grabs her purse and pulls it next to her. If I'm feeling particularly generous, I just ignore them and I walk right by them. If I'm not feeling too very generous and I've had a heart, I walk behind them, real close behind them. Or I'll come and walk next to them. And it amuses me to no end to see them. I think, let me see how close you can get the purse to you. You can do it. Get it inside of you. You know, pull it in. You can do it. So that's, and again with the media, borders are porous. We talked about social media. Well, the thing is that whatever happens in the United States often gets transposed to here, whether it's true or not. So people see incidents on their TV in the United States, and they assume that it obtains for here also. It often does not. But the message has been sent that this is the way things function. I noticed that since Ferguson, we see more people complaining about racial profiling. The numbers were actually down. They peaked in 2012, and they've been going down since then. Since Ferguson, we've seen an upswing in them. And when I look at some of the comments on social media that are being made about them, it's, they do this to us. And I can't tell you how many times I've said, but nothing's being done to us here. Yes, but we're all one. And so, although we're Quebecers, although we're Les Montréalais, there's this coming together where that often takes a second, they take a step back, because at that moment we all become whatever that ethnic group is that sees themselves as being under siege. And it's very, very difficult to move from there. And because citizens respond to those perceptions. Those who see themselves as being attacked, and those who see themselves as having to protect themselves from those who've been attacked. And so the media unwittingly helps to create this division of fear and distrust. And they don't mean to, they're doing their jobs, I understand that. But I think it's incumbent upon them to think about it. What message are they sending? Ensuite, in order for people to deal with this, then, they have to be able to create community resilience. And what do we mean by community resilience? By community resilience, we mean it's the ability to withstand something and recover to a previous state. We see this in emergency disaster management, for example. People go through it, and they have to get back to that state. However, if they have been destroyed before then, and if neighbors don't trust each other, you're not going to see that resilience. People feel alone. If people are going to lock their doors when your child goes missing, or when your basement is flooded, if you live in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu and your basement is one of the ones that's flooded, but the relationship within that community is such that people don't trust each other, you don't have a resilient community. And that's what cities must promote. We have to treat each other in such a way that we create a resilient city, such that when something occurs, we do in fact become our neighbor's keepers. Some of you know of the tragedy that happened outside of Toronto a couple of days ago with that 3-year-old Elijah. Since Elijah's death, and even before, you'll see people were outside searching, looking for him. There was some cohesion there. Since his death, they've started to collect money to bury him. When I left the house this morning, they were up to over $40,000. So there is some resilience in that community. We saw it right after the attack in Ottawa, the terrorist attack in Ottawa, when we saw a mosque being attacked. And the people in the town in Alberta in which this mosque is situated came out and said, "Not in my community." And they got buckets of paint and painted over the mosque to remove those horrendous messages which were being sent. There we're looking at a resilient community. And that's very important that we create those pockets of resiliency. And Montreal can be somewhere where we have resilience. But we've got to stop being afraid of each other. We've got to reach out to each other. So what does that mean? It means that you have a sense of inclusion. You have a sense of empowerment. You have the ability, because you feed off each other and you merge your strengths and you compensate for your weaknesses. You have the ability to work with authority figures and government. So maybe my strength is in being able to talk to government, but your strength is in writing the briefs that we need. So we can work together to do that. You're creating a resilient a resilient city. You can have combined critical reflections, which means we have to trust each other, because you're not going to have critical reflections unless we can be honest with each other. They will not occur. People will become defensive. They'll be afraid to say what they need to say. So being resilient means that we can be open. We can be truthful with each other. We can say, "I'm not too happy about that statement that you're making," or "I'm not too pleased about this," without people feeling that they're under attack. One of the worst things that we do in communities is that, and it was alluded to this morning, is that when someone tells you, "This is my life," someone says, I don't know if it's because people feel guilt or what it is, they say, "You've got a chip on your shoulder." That is not going to build a resilient community. All that tells me is that my reality does not take up the same space and is not as important as your reality. But if you can say, "I don't know your reality, tell me about it," That's all people want to hear. They just want to know you're listening. They just want to know that it's a place where there's a place for them, and that your reality is not such that it trumps my reality, and my reality does not trump yours. We can talk about it. That's what resilience does. You can develop public-private partnerships. We heard Louise talking about that a little bit earlier. And you can then form joint solutions and joint consultations. We can go together. And rather than saying, this is the Arab part of the city, let them go and do their thing, and this is the Caucasian part, and this is the academic part, and this is the itinerary. Together, we as a city, we say, we want our city to be this way, and we go together as an inclusive whole, and we can have those public-private partnerships, and we can do the joint consultations, because we care equally. We see ourselves as equal, and we see each other as equal. However, the messages and the proposed solutions must have personal resonance. If they don't have personal resonance, someone talked yesterday about going into communities top down and saying, this is what you need. You don't know what the community needs. One of the problems with politicians, you know I love you. One of the problems with politicians is that they go into a room already having the answer. And sometimes you're trying to talk to them and they're not really listening to you because they're 10 miles ahead trying to convince you of what they think that they want you to know, because sometimes their goal is to try to manipulate you into seeing it their way rather than understanding what you want them to hear. Now, peradventure, you may end up with the same solution at the same place. That happens very often. But for goodness sake, give them time to get there. Don't just go in and bash them over the head and say, yeah, I know you think there's racial profiling, but it doesn't exist because in my thing it says, sir, it doesn't exist, therefore it doesn't exist. Anything else you want to talk about? So we have to be very careful about that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the police. The police has a central role to play as a major agency of the city. They're the most visible agents that you have in any city. They're more visible than the firemen. You see the fireman going down the street and you pull off the street, but the thing is, the fireman doesn't arrest you. The fire marshal can come to your home and say, look, you need to be doing these things, and they can call the police, but the firemen, they're not there to arrest you. Police are, and they patrol the street. Now, I have a lot of respect for police. And as a young person was talking to me this morning, there you go, and I was saying to her that their job, I wouldn't want to be a policeman. Their job is not an easy job, and they cannot win. No matter what they do, they cannot win. And as much as we hate being tarred with a single brush, but we feel so comfortable doing it to the police. We feel so comfortable saying, oh, one police do that. Police are all like that. And it rolls off our tongues so easily. But we don't like it when it's done to us. But they're the most visible agents of the city. They're the ones you go to, where do I go? They give you tickets, but they also save your life very often. My nephew is a policeman with Scotland Yard. And he was working undercover, and he got stabbed. He was stabbed. And people heard that he'd gotten stabbed, and I've heard some of this in Canada also. Oh, a pig got stabbed. Who cares? I've even seen in some of the social media people say, so what if a policeman got stabbed? He died, too bad, who cares? This is somebody who has a wife or a child and a mother and a father and children. We don't cheer at people's death. When we go to manifestations, we shouldn't be carrying hammers. We should not be taking the lug nuts off the wheels of the police car. Be angry, but we're talking about people's lives. We shouldn't be doing that. But that means that the police and the citizens must become partners. We have to listen to each other. We have to understand what they're going through. As much as we want them to understand what we're going through, it has to be a two-way street. Otherwise, it's always going to be confrontational. It's always going to be des maudits policiers, des cochons, you know, it's always going to be that. But if we work together, we can understand each other's perspectives. So when my nephew got stabbed, you heard, oh, you know, the pig got stabbed. Who cares if this pig got stabbed? You know, they're all white, they're all pigs. I can assure you my nephew is not white. He's not a pig. And you know why he got stabbed? Because he was in a drug bust of a group of people who were selling drugs to children in the school. And he went in there to try to save a child who had been kidnapped by one of the perpetrators to hold the child as ransom. And my nephew didn't want to wait for backup. As I said, he was undercover. And so he charged the man to save the child. And he was stabbed quite badly. He's okay now, he's back out there working. But the thing is, the narrative that went around that was not, let me try to understand what happened. Why was this man stabbed? It was, a pig got stabbed. Glory, hallelujah. So we have to develop partnerships. Citizens' perception of police is a major nub of how safe people feel, and how fairly they feel they're treated, and how included they feel. So let me tell, if you look at Ferguson, do you know what happened in Ferguson? Is there anybody here who doesn't know what happened in Ferguson? Okay. So in Ferguson, after the grand jury trial, well, there was no trial, after the decision came down, people say, why are these people burning their city? Why are they casser les vitres? You know, why are they breaking windows? But the thing is, they didn't feel that was their city, because people moved out of the city when they moved in. And it was seen as somewhere, why would anybody want to live here? So they left the city. So destroying Ferguson wasn't seen as a horrible, horrible thing to do, because it wasn't seen, it wasn't viewed by the city fathers and mothers, wasn't viewed by them as somewhere that needed to be protected. It was seen as something that was disposable. Compare that to what happened with Michael Eric Garner in New York. Nobody smashed anything. New York was seen as a city that's vibrant, that's alive, and nobody wants anybody to do anything to New York. And so what happened in New York was that people marched. They went on the street, nobody broke anything, they protested. And the only people who were upset about the protests were the police, because the mayor sided with the citizens and said, I have a child and he could have been one of these people. But two different cities, two murders in the city, two different responses. One, a city that was alive and vibrant, where nobody wanted anything to happen to New York City. Another city that most people hadn't heard about until the event occurred and everybody had left the city. We don't care about that city. It's just those people who live down there who care. What's not to not burn? I'm not saying they did the right thing, but I'm just asking us to see it through that prism. So, as you heard, I'm a researcher, and what we wanted to know was whether cultural competence can be used by police as a way to enter into conversations with citizens, as one of the tools that can be used to prevent radicalization leading to violence. So what we did was we looked at 3 cities, Toronto, Montreal, and Saskatoon, and we looked at which groups mostly complain, A, about their interaction with the police, and which groups see themselves as targeted for radicalization as terrorists. Now, we had Muslims, we had an oversampling of Muslims, an oversampling of blacks, we had an oversampling of Asians, and we used Caucasians as our control group. Yeah, what do you want from my life? we use Caucasians as the control group. We're in two phases. The first phase is to ask citizens what they think of police cultural competency training and whether it can be used as a tool. And the second phase, which we're just starting, is to ask police what they think of their own cultural competency training and what they think the citizens said about them. We had 3,387 respondents. We engaged the firm Environics to actually conduct the online quantitative research, the qualitative we did ourselves. And I wanted an independent company to do it because I didn't want there to be any bias or anybody thinks that there could be bias. Also, most of the people at Environics are white. And so, and with the police, the section I'm doing now, everybody I've hired to interview them is white. So, what did we find? We found that, and I'm very happy to tell you this, that everybody, regardless, will call the police if they think the country is under siege. If they think that there's a security issue, most people will make that phone call. Not so much in their neighborhoods. In their neighborhoods, they say more like, it's none of my business. And the security issue in the neighborhood was if somebody's beating somebody or somebody's stealing from somebody or something like that. The national issue was a national security issue. Would you make that phone call? So within the neighborhoods, it's, well, I don't know if I'm going to make that phone call. I don't want anybody to feel that I'm putting my nose in their affairs, those kinds of things. And I expect them to solve their own problems. At the national level, everybody's going to make the phone call. So we know that people love Canada, regardless of their color, regardless of their religion. People love where they live. I want to get that out there. However, once they've made that phone call, the follow-up becomes problematic because people interact with the police based on past experience. So if you've had a bad interaction with the police, or your family member has had a bad interaction with the police, or you've read, remember we talked about in the media? You've read something, borders are porous, what happened in the United States, can it happen here? That influences how you're going to interact with the police and how much information you're going to give them after you make that initial phone call saying, yes, somebody around here says they're going to blow up the railroad track. That they'll make. The follow-up, a little bit more problematic. Why? Because people rely on history. People rely on history. So they don't want to go. If you look at the black community, what they'll tell you is that the history we've had with the police is something that we don't trust the police. So we also did focus groups after. And what we got was the police don't enter into my community to be part of it. They don't treat us as though we are full-fledged citizens. They don't come to any of our community activities. They're not very friendly. They only come here when they're looking for somebody to arrest. It would be nice if they would come to the community center and maybe share a meal with us when they're not looking for anything. Opportunities being missed left, right, and center. What's happening is that because of those missed opportunities, the chasm is getting wider and wider and wider. And that does not lead to a safe city. Because when people don't feel included, they don't feel it's their city. So it's important for state agents to demonstrate cultural competence within the communities, which means that they've got to be able to demonstrate empathy. They've got to understand cultural history, the fears of people who live in those communities, the societal behaviors of people in those communities, and the perceptions of everybody in those communities. If you don't do that, you're not doing your city any good. So let's go a little bit further. Now, people could not tell us what cultural competency was, and that's fine. You know, do you know what it is? We don't know what it is. Okay. But we had some questions which really come out of cultural competence. But they know behaviors. So, These 6 questions were ones that were focused primarily on cultural competence. A big, big questionnaire, but these. I trust the police to protect the safety of all citizens in my community. Local police do not really care about my community's concerns about safety and security. I'm reading them because I know that way back in the back, I couldn't read what was on there. Local police consistently act in a professional manner. Local police treat citizens the same regardless of their ethnic or religious background. Local police are properly trained to understand people from different ethnic and religious backgrounds. Local police rely too much on physical force to deal with issues in my community. And they could score that from 0-1, meaning strongly agree, up to 4, meaning strongly disagree. And for those who could not say, that was scored as a 99 because we couldn't do anything with it. We don't know what cannot say means. It might mean I don't want to say. It might mean I have no information. Those kinds. So those were the questions. So, but we also had a qualitative section. And we asked people to tell us 3 good things about their community and 3 bad things. Let's look at the good things. They felt it was safe. They felt that the environment was respected. They liked the fact of cultural diversity. It's in its original language. As it said, it's just a very nice multicultural community. People of all cultures live here. Then we went to transport en commun, public transport, low crime rate, clean parks and roads. These were the things they like about their community that made it livable for them. But what are some of the bad things? Too many immigrants, too many Muslim immigrants, homelessness, black people, Anglophones, too many different types of religion. English is treated like a disease. Sometimes the news report too much crime. We can be anxious that it might be dangerous. This is what people are saying about the city of Montreal. These are not all of them. I just put a few on there to give you an idea. Now I need you to ask you, do you think everybody feels comfortable in this city? Because these are your neighbors saying these things about you. And you know who your neighbors are who are saying these things about you. So what you need is greater buy-in using cultural competency. And as I said, I want to reiterate that the messages and proposed solutions must have personal resonance. They must mean something to the people. The recognition of impact of heritage on behavior must be acknowledged. Using that knowledge to interact and maximize communication with others. Internalizing the recognition and knowledge to interact with different communities. And that's the work of Whaley and Davis from 2007. The skills required to effectively interact with individuals and groups from diverse communities with respect to culture, religion, ethnicity, all those things. There's got to be an interdependence and cooperation among and between diverse groups. We heard the lady this morning who spoke about Aboriginals talking about working with other communities to accomplish things. That has to be done because up until now what's happened is that we've been living in silos. And this money goes to the Aboriginal community, the First Nations community, this money goes to the black community, this money goes to the Jewish community, and people are not working together. And it sets up a thing where people then have to actually do nasty things to each other to get the federal dollar because we're not doing things as a group. So I'm against you. Why did you get money and I didn't get money? And we've got to stop that. And cultural competence is needed by everybody. It's needed by politicians, by the heads of industry, civil servants, security personnel, first responders, everybody. If you don't have cultural competence, you're going to have a very difficult time interacting with communities because they need to know that what they're going through makes sense to you, that you hear them, that you're not saying get the chip off your shoulder, that you're not saying, but why on don't? The minute somebody says, but why on don't, you stop listening because you know they're not hearing you. So I don't hear anything after that. If you say, but why on don't, I say, but why on don't yourself? And I'm out of there. So, what's the role of government in this? Well, the role of government needs to encourage more ethnics to become involved in municipal government. That's paramount. They have to develop partnerships with communities. They have to become cognizant of the experiences of diverse communities and not put white makeup on them and make them look like they're in their cercueil. need to be open to constructive criticism and adjust if necessary. This is very difficult for governments to do, to be open to constructive criticism. They have a hard time with this. And I'll tell you quick, I was speaking to a politician a while ago, a city politician, and I was saying something to him or her. And what the hell is a he? He had his mind made up about what it was. Because he said to me, send me your question first. And I don't like doing that. Because I know that once I've sent them my question, they're going to go and create the answer they're not looking at me. They can't read my body language. So I was talking to him and he said, oh, but Myrna, you need to smile about this. You need to smile. And he said, come on, sweetheart. I said, don't call me sweetheart. I'm not your friend. Don't call me sweetheart. And don't tell me to smile, because I'm not smiling because I'm angry. But you shouldn't get angry about these things. I think, who are you to tell me what I should get angry about? And if you look at the work of Peggy McIntosh, this is exactly what she talks about. Because I was talking to him about cockroaches in Côte de Neige, and the immigrants out there, what they're going through. And, if you haven't lived it, you can't tell somebody that what they're experiencing isn't true. And he said, you don't live there. Et puis? Huh? He says, you don't live there. Why are you getting yourself so upset about it? I said, parce que ça fait longtemps that this nonsense has been going on. What are you going to do about it? I remember when Gerard Tremblay went and slept in somebody's house because there were cockroaches. The next morning, the cockroaches were still there. He didn't take them with him. And, they were still there, and they continued being there after there. And they're still living in these houses, and they still have the slumlords doing the same thing. So stop patting me on the head. That's why I don't like sending in messages. But together, when necessary, we need to create appropriate advisory bodies with representation reflective of the communities. And we need to demonstrate and reiterate that we are all, I'm almost done, that we're all in this together. I'm almost done. So what's the role of citizens? You need to become involved in the political process at all levels. They need to exercise their franchise. They need to sit on government committees. I'm just reading because I know they can't hear. They can't read it. Advocate with NGOs for change. Be truthful when making reports affecting the neighborhood. Don't lie. Be informed about issues affecting their neighborhood and ethno-cultural groups. Be part of the city. Expand your comfort zone. It's okay to eat food that you didn't cook, that comes from a different group. Be welcoming to others, including challenging negative assumptions. So I want to say thank you very much for sitting through this. I hope I didn't bore you too badly. Thank you very much indeed. Merci beaucoup.
I suspect that if Uncle Fred were still with us, he'd say, you go, girl. We have time for just a few questions. Short questions, please, so that we can get in as many as we can. I believe the mic is just down there in the aisle, and there it is. Now it's just down there in the aisle. So if there are any students, we'd love to hear questions from students, but also from anybody who cares to put a question. There we go. You're on.
Hello. I had a question. I think you focused a lot on the change in the governments and the police, but I think if the populace, the citizens, are being exclusive, we had to somehow change their mindset. But I was wondering how we could change their mindset without being top down, trying to get them to be more inclusive without having a top down approach.
I think that's an excellent question, and it comes back to people working within systems, becoming part of the system, getting themselves on elected boards, getting themselves as part of advisory committees, presenting themselves for municipal elections. We know that a lot of people in the ethno-cultural communities do not vote. They just don't do it. And so I think that as bad as you think something is, if you want to change it, get on the inside. Make your voice be heard. If you just stay outside, Your voice might be heard, but it will only be seen as a protest. You've got to get at that table. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Oh, one more. You're the last.
Okay, I just wanted to contribute. It's kind of similar to your question, but how do we prevent tokenism when trying to move forward to these things, especially in, I think, preliminary stages? I think people often feel like they're singled out to prove a point as opposed to actually for their valid opinions. Like, how do you ensure genuineness in these initiatives?
Very, very good question. I think that at some level you have to accept that the first one's going to be the token. Now, once you're inside, the question is, do you continue to act as a token? Or do you take your place? I've been the token many times in my life. And in a lot of ways, I still continue to be. I go into rooms and, you know, I'm the only black person there, and I feel the burden on my shoulder. But I know that I have a voice, and I know that I've established some of that voice. I tell people, you know, when I go into a room, I have maybe 5 to 10 seconds to establish that I'm not there to wash the floor. But, you know, that I am Dr. Lashley. I have my credentials. I went to some good universities. I have a very short space in which to do that. Because the aspect of tokenism is really there. And people will say, you're really bright. You know, being black is not a disease, you know. And so, yeah, you have to accept that the first people do have to accept that they're going to be called tokens, and may in fact be. But you've got to swallow it, and you've got to push through. You can't let that be the thing that stops you from trying.
It's hard to think of a better note to end Dr. Lashley's presentation on. But I think Professor Straw now wants to capture our attention with yet another wonderful event.